Good morning.
Good morning.
As you know that this is an early morning for me, but we're going to get started. I wanted to talk about sterling silver. Sterling silver is something that I collected for years, but it's the standard that is used when you see sterling. In America, we are like England. England came up in the during Henry VIII with a standard for their coinage. They wanted it to be substantial and have confidence in the public that they knew when their coinage they knew it was silver. They came up with a standard of 92.5% silver, and the balance was an alloy of copper. Because silver, if it's pure, it's soft. Like gold, if you see, I remember I bought a bracelet for my mother in Greece of 22 karat gold. Well, you could bend it. It was too soft, so they have to put an alloy with it to toughen it up. And a long time, and it was confirmed during the reign of Elizabeth I that 92.5 was going to be the standard. We have that same standard. Europe has a standard of generally 800. It's like coin silver in this country. Coin silver is a lesser standard. And coin silver right now is a very tough sell because it has such a low standard of silver in it. But it was actually made from coins. And even in England, people were taking the coins to have silver made out of it, silverware, and they got to the point where they tried to change the standard in England so that people wouldn't take coinage and have it melted down and made into flatware and so forth. So they tried to raise the standard, well, it didn't last. So it went back to 92.5. And England has what I consider the best standards to this day because they want to ensure the public that when you buy a sterling piece, it is what it is supposed to be. And if you were the artist, and I'm going to show first a piece of silver and showing you the marks, what we refer to as hallmarks. And a lot of times on English silver, you'll find it not on the back, but on the front, because it was a pride of element. And this is a new piece. This is probably in the 80s. There are 4 marks on it. The first mark to show that it's sterling is what we refer to as a lion passant, which is a lion, and it's facing, I have to remember, left. And it has a tail, and that tells you it is sterling. If you created this piece, you would go to the county and they would test it. They'd do a little scratch on it, test it with acid, then they can tell if it's the 92.5%. And then they will do the stamping. The only stamp that you created this was a stamp with your initial. So they would put the stamp on at the county for the lion, telling you it's sterling. They would also have a face of a lion or a side profile of the royals to show you paid the tax to the county. And the last one was an alphabetic letter. And the alphabetic letter would tell you when it was made. Now this is a book, it's called Weiler's Marks, and these are all English hallmarks going back from the 1600s. Every 26 years with the alphabet they change the font, or else they'll change if it's in a circle or a square or a shield. So you can date silver within 2 years of when it was made. The earliest piece I have here, I have some that are going to be passing around, that were 18th century pieces. Well, silver was not available to the masses until you had the Industrial Revolution. Before that, it was only the royalty, the landed gentry that could afford silver. The Industrial Revolution changed that because then all of a sudden you ended up with a middle class. And then they could buy silver, and they even had silver plate. And let me just start by passing this out so you can see the 4 marks on it to show what it is and that it is sterling silver. And even back in the 16th, 17th, 18th century, it was a capital offense to adulterate silver. You could be executed if you tried to change the composition of adding more copper to get away with it. And so I don't know if it is today, but I know it's severe as to what is legal and not. One of my favorite shows is the Antique Roadshow UK version.
Yeah.
I don't care for the American one as much. The UK is usually on channel 44 every night at 7:30.
Or YouTube.
Pardon?
Or YouTube. You can get it all the time.
Yeah, but unfortunately they're so old issues. And the one I really remember was a family had bought a tankard, which is like a picture with a handle and a cover. And they paid £8,000 for it. But it was an illegal piece of, because it had been once a picture. And they took the spout off. And once you change silver in England, it becomes, actually they said it's not even worth the £1,000 of the silver that it was made. Because you can't change content without getting into severe problems. And that's the thing we face today, is the element of counterfeit. I'd like to pass this tray out. One thing I wanted to show you, this is all 18th century, most of it is 18th century silver. Oh, one second. These are 3 spoons. These are formal soups. And you will find that one of them, and I changed my tags, one is dated 1787, one is 1807, and one is 1813.
Wow.
And when you look at the crest, it's the same crest. The armor, it was a man with a suit of armor with a sword, and then is a board. No, this is the wrong one. This doesn't belong to that one. This goes around. So I'll pass this around. I had to take the regular tags off of this stuff because I didn't want you to be shocked by it. Silver goes for it. But look at the crest on that, and yet it shows that they were adding things as they went on during the years to replace silver. Because at that time, the only people that could afford sets was royalty and the very, very wealthy, the landed gentry. And when you look at any of you who were fans of Downton Abbey, knew that the whole system changed after the First World War, and all these vast fortunes dissipated, and it really made such a dramatic change into what. But there's some individual pieces that I want to pass around. I'm going to actually pass the whole tray that you can look around, just to show some of the pieces that I've collected over the years. A marrow scoop. Have any of you had marrow? Did you like it?
I do like it, yeah. Like gold?
Well, if you have the first taste, what the crust is, that's tasty.
Ooh.
But I never got any further than that.
Yeah, it's pretty.
But this was a marrow scoop, and you could see different size, because when they would roast the ox or the beef, they would have the big bones, and you could take, and it was considered a delicacy. And you can see we got two sizes of scoops. Mm-hmm. This piece was made in 1799. So you can see I'm going to stick it in with this tray, because I want to tip this as well. This is one piece that I really treasure. It's a fish slice. You'll find that 18th century silver in England was very, very plain. And you'll find that they didn't get into patterns. What you see here is the most common type of the pattern that you would see. And all of these are English, and they're hallmarked, and I left tags on them giving you the dates. But I wanted to emphasize this piece in the handiwork, because this is not done with a mold. They drilled holes in it and used a file to make all these decorations. So you can see the labor-intensive work that had to go, and when you pull your fingers over it, you can feel how sharp it is. Unfortunately, I had some Scottish spoons that I was going to bring. I sold them, though, at the show in New London last Saturday. So this is just I want to just have a chance to look through and see what there is. It was that golden age, and England had silver. I went into the place in London called the Silver Vault in the 60s, and I asked the clerk, how much silver do you have in this? They said about 3.5 tons.
Whoa.
Because for the grand houses, they would buy sets for 100 people. I don't know if you've ever been to the Breakers in Rhode Island. Near the kitchen area, they had a vault for the family silver, and it had like railroad tracks to move the case, which was 5 feet high, that they could move it out into the van to take it to the New York house. That was the epitome of all the things in Newport that absolutely amazed me. There's one, and I can't think of it, it's the White House. And the woman, because at that point there was such extensive wealth. But these people had, almost all of them, come from very humble means. And yet they had money, and it was like the unsinkable Molly Brown. They went and I remember they showed the ballroom, and each in the chandeliers, there were perfume bottles. And before a party, they would fill it with perfume, and when they lit the candles, they would take the covers off, and they would heat the perfume, and it would wave through the room. And her budget was $25,000 a year. This is back in the 1900 era. I mean, this is the obscene, because I never could understand someone designing your house, what you're going to put in, what you're going to wear, and every bit of color without having input. I never could understand that. You know, to me, if I'm going to say, I want this color and I want that color and so forth, so it just intrigued me. In America, we did have a standard in the late 18th century of 92.5. But I used the Civil War as a cutoff. After the Civil War, we started to see sterling. Prior to that, it was coin silver. And some of you recognize these types of spoons. And the teaspoons that have bite marks, because it's so soft that when people, they're very delicate and very soft. But they also had some interesting other pieces. These are all coin that I want you to see. And this is one I particularly like. It has on the back, Sister's Gift. People back then were always putting engraving. I remember doing a show up in Wells, in Kennebunk, Maine, and a woman came up and said, I'm looking for something for my daughter. And I had one of these big stuffing spoons, and on the back it said, from her mother, 1875. And so, trust me, I had a sale right off there. Didn't take long. So here's a tray of coins, look through it. I've got some pieces here that I want to talk about fraud. Not that you see fraud in America.
Tom, sir, can I ask a question? With the coin silver,
Is a lesser standard.
right, but is it, I mean, it's older usually?
It's older, yes.
So when it comes to just value,
I would say
Is it-
it's about well, right now, I don't price silver because you have to weigh it, unfortunately. And I refuse to have a scale. I did buy some silver from a dealer. I paid $900 for it, and I sold it 2 weeks ago in Maine because the guy had a scale, and he did the formula, and it came out and was worth $700. So I sold it. So I buy, unfortunately, from my heart and not my brain. If I like it, I'm going to buy it and hope that I can find someone that'll come to
who's
my way of
equally,
thinking.
right. So that's interesting. So it's really just the metallic value, and there's no
Yeah.
real aesthetic or
Unfortunately today,
historical
all
value.
silver is based on weight,
Huh.
and it's so unfortunate. The only thing that has, pardon?
It's surprising that there's no.
Well, it's the
aesthetic.
basis. If you look in any of the magazines, or the ads for silver, it'll say 200 and so on ounces.
Right.
And then you can go through, I think the price now is between $20 and $25 an ounce, which a good heavy spoon is about an ounce. And unfortunately, I never used that principle. I go by, if I liked it,
Right.
I was going to buy it, and
yeah.
hopefully I would find
The
someone
rest
else.
of antiques. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there weren't like famous silversmiths
Oh, there were.
that was like, oh, this is from so and so, and
Oh, yes.
it would be
Here's,
more,
this
even
is
more
all
than.
American silversmiths.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and these are, the other book I had was for the silversmiths in England.
Okay.
So there were tons of silversmiths. When I talk about values and that, it's hard to really pinpoint because there's certain things that have extra value. For example, Tiffany silver
Okay.
has an extra value. The most popular and expensive pattern is chrysanthemum from Tiffany, which is quite an elegant pattern, but it has a premium. But a lot of things don't have that premium value because I hate it when people come up and go like this. You can tell that they're weighing it in their hand. And at one time, I sold a lot of silver in a show in Fitzwilliam, and the guy told me 2 months later when I saw him at another show, you know all that silver I bought for you? I scrapped it on Monday and I made $700.
Oh.
And see, that's the trouble. They call it, I like the civilized term, spot metal value, which translates equals to scrap value. And to me, it's so offensive
Yeah.
to feel, because a lot of stuff does get scrapped. But a good stuff, it doesn't get scrapped.
What do they do with the scrap?
They melt it
Oh.
and make it into bars,
Oh.
and so it's gone. I had quite a few pieces of this silver. It's patented in 1902. And all your sterling in America is either one of three things. It's either active, inactive, or obsolete. Active means they make it on a regular basis. You can go into a silver dealer and you can buy a place setting or whatever you need. Inactive means that they will only make it at one time of the year. So they will take orders through the year, like you want to replace a couple spoons, a fork, and so forth. At a certain date, they'll take all the orders that they had and make so many spoons and so many forks. If it's marked obsolete, the dies have been destroyed. So the only place you could buy them would be like from an antique dealer, or you could go to a place like Replacements. I don't know if you've ever seen ads for replacements. The price that you pay them but they have, again, tons of silver to replace them. Now this is a wonderful piece of what I call Whiting Lily, and it's a division of Gorham. The Gorham is one of the biggest companies. They've bought out so many companies over the years, and I'm trying to make sure I bring that one up next. Okay. Now this is a wonderful piece of silver, and you look on the back, the beautiful. This took 2 molds to make, and they could adjust the molds as to how heavy you wanted your piece of silver. If you wanted it to impress, you could make it thicker, and then they had to shave a lot off. So that's the real piece. Now this is a piece of counterfeit lily. I bought it purposely. I knew it was a counterfeit piece because it's so poor in comparison. And I did have it tested, and they said it is sterling. What they did is they took a bunch of sterling, melted it down, and made a mold. They took a piece like that, made a mold, and then melted silver into it, and this is the counterfeit. And I bought it purposely because of that. So you can compare the two to show that it is possible. I've seen pieces of chrysanthemum that were not right. And to think that they would counterfeit that and go through the effort to that, to me is, because I'm beyond shock anyways. But, it's just...
But it says sterling on the back?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's counterfeit.
Yeah, but it's sterling.
Okay, it's sterling,
But
but
it's not lily, and it's not a pattern. When we look at different manufacturers, one of my favorite companies was in Concord, New Hampshire, the Durgan factory. One of the most popular patterns that I've had for customers is Fairfax. And I'm going to give you all a catalog showing the Fairfax piece by piece what it was and so forth. But they were operated in near White's Park in Concord. There's a brick building. It's part of the law school of the University of New Hampshire. And that was a Durgan factory. And they made wonderful silver. They had been bought out by Gorham in like 1900. And in 1939, Gorham moved the plant to Rhode Island. Took all the dyes, closed the plant here. Now this is a tray of silver that was made in Concord, New Hampshire. It has a scripted D on the back of each piece. And in that, there's going to be one piece. It's the most expensive piece of silver I ever bought. And it was a custom piece that Durgan made. And it has a scripted D when you look in the back. And again, this has all these cutouts. And if you look closely, when it came out of a mold, there was a skin of silver still there. So they had to go through and punch that out. And you can look carefully, you can see file marks. This was a piece at the time I think I paid a little over $500 for it. And because I wanted it, today I have my regrets. Reality. And so I'm going to pass this around. And of course there's some butter knives and I thought I had this already. That's all Durgan. Oh, one more thing, there's a strawberry fork in it. You know, when you look at America, otherwise, England didn't do it like America did. When you look at the Newport and you saw some of the things, the photographs of this, they had something like 45 pieces per playset.
Oh my goodness.
But they would only put out the ones you would use. But it got to be America trying to show class, whatever you want to call it, by having all this individual stuffs and things like that that really amazed me. But it's like, this is a horseradish server. So you have to make sure you use the right utensil when you're serving. I remember going to Mabel Miller, some of you don't remember Mabel. She lived in Nancy Collins' house before, and she used to take, for those that like horseradish, take a piece of celery, put some peanut butter in it, put a little dollop of horseradish on top of it, and really it's quite delicious. I don't know if I'm going to go for it myself. There was a time when lettuce was served as a course, and this is a lettuce fork. And it was especially when they had iceberg lettuce. That was a novelty. People had not had something, and it was served as a course, and you had to use the right fork to serve it. The other piece I have, now this is a pasta server. Now, I don't remember things. This is called, it's Chantilly. It was patented in 1896. It's still active. But back in 1896, they didn't have pasta in this country. But after 1900, when the Mediterranean people came, which are with Italy and Greece and so forth, pasta was a big part of their life. Here was a new market, and they said, well, let's take and add a piece to our collection, and they made pasta service because it was a new market for them to delve into. So it really was for financial reasons. I'm going to pass this tray around here. This is a silver ice cream slice.
Oh.
When they made ice cream, they made it into a brick form. Some of you have seen sets of dishes with a long tray and some of 12 small squares. Those were ice cream dishes. And when you made it and you served it, you had to use the right utensil to cut it and put it on the plate. I mean, this is, to me, like, what's a spoonful, or a scoop. But it was that thing of where you won't find this in England, because there's not that desire for upmanship, if you would, but for us it was important. This I have is a cucumber tomato server, which also can be used to pick up cheese. So, I mean, to me, it's the individuality that someone wants to do it. And if you really wanted to do something, was have a bacon server. Now this is a pattern, it's by Kirk, and it was patented in 1828. It's one of the oldest fancy patterns in this country. And at one time, this was done with a mold. Originally in 1800, they were making it, they were sculpting it out of using tools to sculpt the pieces. I had a serving dish that was that, and you could rub your hand on it and you would cut yourself. It was so sharp, but it was individualized. And this is also that same pattern, Rococo. And I'm going to pass this around this tray. This is show and tell.
What year was that, this last one?
1896 for the. But
Yeah,
that's when you see, after the Civil War is when we got into all these patterns being made. This is a book that I use, the Sterling Flatware Index. This goes up to the 1970s. And you look, these were the patterns that were available. And this book will tell you when it was patented and whether it's active, inactive, or obsolete. So I use this all the time. But some of these are favorite pieces of mine. I used to specialize in what we call platter spoons or stuffing spoons. These are big spoons like this. And I've always loved these. And this one even has a button on the back so it wouldn't slip into the bowl. And this is one, this was a Kirk. When I pass this around, please look at the back of that. It has the most beautiful initial. When you look at some of the initials, you have to say, well, what initial do you want? Because sometimes you could make any amount of initials out of it. And these are four more platter spoons. These are relatively new. This was made in the 1940s, Old Newbury Crafters out of Massachusetts. And this is a handmade piece of silver, and this is named by a man by the name of Erickson in Gardner, Massachusetts. And he made an awful lot of church silver. And if you look really close on the back, you can still see where the hand pounding is, that he did it making out of a strip of silver, pounding it, heating it, heating it. So those are my stuffing spoons. I bought this piece a couple of years ago. It's Middle East. It's Islamic period. I don't know what country it is, but it does, and if you look on the back, it has a bump. You can see that was where they pounded the hallmark in it. But when you look at the design, it was done with an X-Acto knife to etch in here. And I just look at that pattern, and you can really tell that I bought it because it was quite crudely made, but it was interesting to me. I didn't have this tested to see the content of silver. But I'm going to pass that around. Next to last, because everything is question. My personal collection. My grandmother and grandfather came to Deering in 1905. My grandmother grew up in Wellesley Hills and Mass, and they came up and my grandfather worked the farm. And she had like 6 pieces of silver, serving pieces. She never had a set. And I know that she sold some of her silver during the Depression. As my mother said, if she needed food for the children or grain for the cattle always won out. So it was a case. But there were 5 pieces left, so when my grandmother died in '58, each of the children got a piece of silver. And this was a piece that my mother got, and it's called Lily of the Valley. And it's made by Gorham. It was patented in 1885. This is one of the pieces she had. Plus, I have her dozen teaspoons. I don't know, does anyone know Meg Eger in Hillsborough? Well, Meg's father and my grandmother were brother and sister. And he gave her this dozen spoons in 1905 when my grandmother was married. So when they died, my aunt got 4, my other aunt got 4, and my mother got 4. So when the 2 died, the set came back together again. and he had them engraved, and the pattern on this one is called Waiting, and it's Duke of York, 1900, and it's inactive. And last but not least, I've got to have, this is my own pattern of silver that I have. I bought a set, actually, I use what people that know me well, they'll hear the term the Thelma National Bank. The Thelma National Bank was my mother. And she had this rule that she would loan me any money I wanted, well, two reasons, but I had to pay her back and pay 10% on top of it.
Wow.
And she did that for me even with my cars. She had a burial account. And I said, "Ma, the bank wants to get so much for a car loan." And she said, "Make it worth my while, and I'll do it." But it had to be done legally, in the sense that we had a small savings account. It was my emergency $500. And she would set it up. I'd say, "I need to borrow $10,000 at such a rate for 3 years. What's my monthly payment?" So I would set it up. I'd go from my checking account to her savings, her burial account. And I would say, "You can't die for the next 3-4 years." And so, but she did finance cars for me, which was wonderful. But my mother never had a set of silver. So. But I bought this set, and this is the set that I bought, and I've been looking for the documentation. It had belonged to the Davis family. They gave the Davis Cup in tennis. I bought this from a woman in Candia, New Hampshire, was related to them, that she had inherited that, and I had a chance to buy it, and unfortunately I had to go to the Thelma National Bank to get it, and it took me a while to pay it off. The pattern is called Le Saint Fleur. It's a Reed and Barton pattern in 1900. It is inactive. Now Reed and Barton has, to me, an interesting connection with New Hampshire. Because if you go up to Lancaster, the Weeks family are very prominent in that there's the park, their home is open. Well, the Weeks family owned Reed and Barton. And also, some of you go by on holidays, you'll see a worn flag in front of my house. That was a flag that was given to me by Gertrude Murdoch of Ware, who was Sinclair Weeks' administration assistant. Sinclair Weeks was the Secretary of Transportation under Eisenhower. And the flag that I have, Gertrude gave it to me. It flew over the Capitol and was presented to the Weeks family. And she got it from the family and she gave it to me. And this is the silver that I have as my set. And I just wanted, it's got 10 pieces per playset.
Wow.
You know, it's got from a demi-tasse, because when you look at patterns of silver, like with spoons, you have a demi-tasse, which is very tiny, a 4 o'clock, a 5 o'clock, then a teaspoon. 4 o'clock would be like for tea, 5 o'clock would be coffee. Not to say you're going to have both, but you're going to have one or the other. And they're different sized bowls. And I remember I used to collect the 5 o'clock spoons, because they've got about probably 3/4 the size of a teaspoon. And a woman in Walpole said, "You know, I serve creme brulee a lot." And she said, "You get a man with a teaspoon, 3 spoons, it's gone." So I said, "Try this. Buy the 5 o'clock spoons." And she did it. She said it slowed them right down. So they didn't go through it as quickly. The last couple of things I want to show you, I'll pass that around. Now this silver teapot is, to me, it's something that's very special to me. This was when my grandmother and her family came to America in 1884. This was the only piece that my great-grandmother bought from Scotland. It's not sterling, it's a plated piece. And I had to have it replated. I had to have it repaired because the bottom was so worn, I was able to have it fixed. But if you look on the bottom that way, it's not symmetrical, it's not even. Because when they made this, and I want you to look particularly at all the stamp work, they had this piece as a piece of flat silver. They would do the embossing on it, and then they would heat it up, put it into mold, bang it to make these ridges. So it's very labor intensive. And in Scotland, you'll find most of the crests have this belt around it. And then they would have the family crest right in the middle. But again, I had that resilvered. And this has the insulators. This is wood. Sometimes you'll find the insulators, if you don't have an insulator, your hand is going to burn. And even like this one has insulators. And sometimes they can either be bone, wood, or ivory. And of course, today we can't buy ivory. So,
I have a quick question. By having it resilvered, does it take away the value of it?
it didn't have that great a value to begin with
Oh,
because it was plated. If it was sterling, that'd be a different story.
okay.
But it's just, to me, it's more a sentimental family piece that I really like. The last piece I want to show you, well, I wanted to show one other thing. People ask me, what do I use for polish? Not that I own stock in this, but I use Wrights.
Yes.
And you could get it at Shaw's. I didn't see it the last time. Let me tell you a story about Wright silver polish. Guess where it was originally made? Keene, New Hampshire.
Oh, no kidding.
The Wright family were farmers. The cattle were out. And like they did over in Switzerland, they had bells on the cattle. And one of the cows didn't come home. So they said, oh, we've got to go look for that cow. They went out to the pasture, and they could hear the bell ringing, and there was the cow stuck in mud,
Oh, no.
up to,
Oh,
and guess what the mud was? Diatomaceous earth.
oh,
Like,
And the bell was shiny all around the edge from flashing in the mud,
Huh.
and they become Silver Cleaners Company.
No kidding.
did they save the cow?
They saved the cow.
Yeah.
But,
Importantly.
but that, because for many years it would say Keene, New Hampshire. They
Yeah.
sold the company,
Yeah.
and I like it because it's not too costly. Even when you use good polish like this, there's a certain element of
Oh, yeah.
silver that will come off.
Oh,
You can't help it, it's wear and tear. I never want to see people using those dips, because those are so caustic. And also, they take away the detail. If you took every bit of tarnish out of the detail work, it's ugly looking, it's
Yes.
white, it's not. And the same with putting the aluminum foil in the kitchen sink. Those just take. And just to show you, this is a pair of, I have the 5-branch candelabras going with it. But this is plated, and this is a Gorham company as well. And you can see that it's been worn, so you can see some of the copper underneath. Now, I know a lot of people that had silver, they said, well, it's showing the copper. Use it. It's lovely that way, because it shows it's been taken care of and polished to the nth degree. I don't polish my silver. I did polish this stuff, because it had been handled at the shows I did this summer. But I like to use Wrights because it's a gentle polish and it does not do any damage. I think one other thing, just to show the epitome of, if you were a traveler in England and you wanted to go on a tour, you could bring your own utensils. Your own, it's a travel set. Unfortunately, the damage, this happened in Wells this year. A young man picked up the knife and broke it, so the blade was even sterling. So I got to find a way of getting that repaired. But imagine bringing your own set because you didn't want to use whatever the rest of the people used.
that's sweet.
One last piece. This is my pride and joy. This is a sterling coffee pot from 1780-81, and it was made by a woman, Hester Bateman. Hester Bateman was a silversmith. The Bateman family were very well known in England as silversmiths. There was Peter, Anne, William, and Hester. And when her husband died, she took over. And hers is one of the rare marks. This is a piece I bought from Georgiana Guile. her daughter was Barbara Murphy, who had an antique shop in Hillsborough. And I bought this in the 70s, and it took me a year and a half to pay for it. Because back then, dealers could say, give me, $100 a month and so forth. So, and then when I was done, they said, you paid enough. That was it. But this is my absolute treasure. It's going to go off to auction sometime soon. I don't want to pass it around, but you're welcome to come up and look at it. This was made, and you can look carefully, there's a seam that goes here. And it was a flat piece of silver, and they embossed it, and then curved it over a mold. And it was in pieces, and they could take it up. But when you look at that work, considering from 1780, to think that it's the aspect of civility, and you look inside and you can see where all that work was done. To me, this is incredible.
What is the handle? Is it
It's
wood?
wood. It's a wooden handle.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they had the wooden handles because of the insulation qualities, because you wouldn't burn your hand.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than picking up a hot kettle teapot that doesn't have an insulator, and sometimes they would. Unfortunately for this is the original handle. And I've seen ones without the handle broken, but it's just
It's lovely.
it's just a wonderful piece.
And they would actually use that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've used it.
You have?
Oh yeah,
Huh.
I used to entertain, but I haven't entertained for years, and it's just
Beautiful.
but it's just I've always liked silver for some reason. As my grandmother used to say, well, you can always at some time take a bunch of spoons to the store and say, buy some food, but but it's to me it's the scariest thing about silver and sets. I've done antique shows in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine for 25 years, and in every single show I go to, I've had the same common response. I have 3 sets of silver, and the kids don't want it.
Oh.
Yes.
And it's a universality. And I said, do it this way. Just instead of asking what they want, say, you're going to pick a set for you. Make up a story. This was given to me by my great aunt. She was the luckiest person on this earth. She worked so hard, to do things for that. And, if you put it in, it makes it a little bit of guilt. Which to me is wonderful. And guilt is important, I think. Nancy Mooney. Remember Dick and Nancy Mooney? They lived up on Mountain View. Thank you. When they died, when they moved to North Andover, Mass. They divided up their things, and they didn't ask the kids what they wanted. They chose what they were going to give them. And we're giving you this because your father bought this for a special occasion, and then so she had a story for every piece that she had. And I think it's important to do that. Always look at, if you have some silver and you want your kids to say, my father worked so hard to save money. My sister bought her silver at the time when you could get it at the bank. If you deposited so much, you could get a piece of spoon for a few dollars. She eventually got a set for 8 place pieces, 5 pieces per place setting. But it's just, to me, the idea of, I find it so heartbreaking that every show I do, there's at least 5 to 6 people that said the kids don't want it. They think it's an option, because technically they said, well, you can't put it in the dishwasher. And I think that's the argument. The reason you really, the knives are the problem. The knives, the blade is stainless steel, and it has a shaft that goes into the handle. They put a form of pitch in the handle. So if you have your knives in a dishwasher, and if they aren't perfectly straight, that pitch will melt from the heat, and it'll be at half mast. My whole set of silver had been put into and all the knives were at an angle. But I sent them off to Reed and Barton. At that time, they charged me $1 a piece to have them restraightened. So that's the only thing, technically you don't want to put sterling in a dishwasher, but you technically can, but maybe not use the sterilizing system, or make sure the knives are perfectly
Well,
straight.
they don't touch your stainless.
Pardon?
And also, don't touch their stainless. You can't mix the stainless.
You don't mix them, yeah. Yeah, it's just, it's a burden to have silver, and to keep things polished. I looked at some of my set in the front room and I said, oh, I keep on looking, because I'm having trouble with my hands doing fine detail work. But I'm looking at it, age too has an awful lot to do with it. But I'm open for questions.
Can you explain the difference between obsolete and inactive?
Pardon me?
The difference between obsolete and inactive?
Obsolete, the dies are destroyed. They've been destroyed. Inactive, I had to buy a couple spoons for my set because my mother had some friends over when she still had it, and unfortunately she saw this woman that she knew take a couple spoons and put them in her pocket. And but it was so I replaced them, and it was interesting because it was still inactive, but it's still, they have the mold still, and you can have them custom. I think it used to be something like March of every year. They would take all the orders that they received the whole calendar year up through the March, and then make them. You could make 27 knives, so many this, so many that.
When that teapot, you said it was formed by a sheet of silver that was folded over
Yeah.
the wool. How did they get it?
They had a pattern mold for it. They had an outline of what they needed before they embossed it. And they would have a piece of paper and say, this is the pattern you need to make this.
Yes.
And you would trace it on the big sheet of silver. And then you would work it, and then you would put it over, you had to heat it,
Right.
and then put it over molds to start the curving. Terribly labor intensive.
So the putting it over the molds, is that a heat process?
Yes. But to think they did that in the 1780s, I find that fascinating to say the least. Any other questions?
Sylvie, we had, I think Lily brought a piece
Yeah.
to look at, and I know Betsy Harrington had to leave, but I let her know where you live.
Okay.
She might swing by. so.
And because before I look at this, there's one last thing I want to give everyone. See if I can find it. One of the most popular patterns that Durgan made in Concord, at least for me, I have 6 customers that collect Fairfax. Now, the only piece of Fairfax I have is a damaged child's fork. But Fairfax was patented in 1911. And it was based on the back of a chair on an estate in Fairfax, Virginia. See how they get this dovetail? But I have customers that are wanting Fairfax. And when you look at Fairfax, like I did with the other Durgan pieces, it has a scripted D on the back. And a friend of mine in Hopkinton gave me a catalog from I think it was 26, showing just the front of the Durgan factory in Concord. And this is just for Fairfax. This is one pattern, and it showed every piece that they made, life-size, of what it was for. And I counted one time, I think there was like 125 different pieces that you could buy. And each of you is going to take one of these, and even there's a pull-out. And that's when I learned something I had never known before when I got this. That you look in the back, it has a price list. And you could buy that, and this is the first time I knew you could buy in different weights. If you wanted fairly small, if you were economical, they had like for teaspoons, you could buy a dozen. Medium weight was $17 a dozen. Heavy was $21 a dozen. Extra was $26 a dozen. Now, I know when my grandmother's present of the spoons from her brother, they probably cost him $15 for the dozen. But back in 1905, $15 was more than a week's pay. So when you look at the system, so would you be so kind as to give everyone a copy?
Tom, maybe I'm crazy, but when I was looking at your pieces, these two, this one feels heavier than this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Is it again?
It could possibly be from 2 different sets.
Put together.
Yeah.
That one was heavier than the other.
Heavier than the other,
Yeah.
yeah, but I noticed as soon as.
Yeah,
I
you can
picked
feel
one or
them.
The other.
And
Yeah.
it's amazing, because it's all economics. It's what people are willing and wanting to pay.
That's cool.
I think this was Lillian's tray, the round one.
Yeah.
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 Well, it's lovely. It's a lovely tray. I know that this is a plated piece, but I'm trying to, is there a name tag or anything on it?
Oh, it's under.
Well, I don't know, she lived in Massachusetts.
I don't know, sometimes it's awfully hard to find the mark. It's a beautiful tray. It's plated. I'm gonna guess that this is probably about 1920.
She
It
got
could be.
married in 1925.
Yes. And you know, when you look at that detail work on this, that's exquisite. Was there a tea set with this?
Yes.
Okay.
Tea set, yeah.
Yeah. The
But
teapot.
I don't know if it goes with that, because the tea set is Reed Barton, but that doesn't have.
Okay. Because Reed and Barton was a very good company. As I was explaining, it was owned by the Weeks family, and but it's a beautiful tray. Unfortunately, plated pieces don't bring that much because there's just a skin of silver on them. But I think it's a beauty. When you look at the detail in those, you know, someone had to make
Yeah.
to do this etching. Some of it could be machine done, but it was really, it's that ability to make these, like with Hester making that, and pounding that out from the inside. People thought, well, they made it like that. Then they had a flat piece,
Wow.
which was interesting.
So how would you make that etching?
Huh?
How was that etching done?
It was that, it's, a lot of it was handwork, a lot of it is machine. It's just someone just working on it. And sometimes when they took that out of a mold, it might have part of the pattern with it, but then they had to go and do some of the embossing on it to bring out the detail.
With a knife?
It would be like a knife. It'd be almost something that's, it'd be like something you could sort of carve with. But this is, I love footed trays. This is a plated piece as well. I can't see under this one. That's the thing that drives me crazy. You would think that when some company makes something, make it so that you can find the name, you know. But again, it's that lovely embossed work, which I think is interesting. And they've got the shell. A lot of times you see shells on silver, and I like the shape of this. And again, this has, I would say that this is ivory insulator. It's got a nice finial, and it's got like the finial. It's got you could take the finial off. It's got a screw on it. That's very typical. Does this come from a set?
That, I don't know. It has another matching teapot like that
A
has a bigger
smaller one?
And I have a bigger one and then the same size as that. I
Okay.
have three.
Because it might, because a lot of these sets, someone has an extra number. I can't think of it. I think it's Taunton. But someone put the numbers on. It looks like almost like Social Security.
Oh.
You know, there was a time when people were doing that. You were putting their Social Security numbers on their silver in case it got stolen.
Yeah.
They could find it. And then when they sold it, I mean, I had a few pieces that had that. That people, it was very popular at one time to mark your stuff with your Social Security.
So is that
So-
sterling or silver plated?
It's plated. It's plated.
Okay.
But it's a nice piece. You know, when you see insulators on handle, it's a better quality piece. This is a Seder plate that brought in. And it's, you know, and part of it, I think, is looking at the trials and tribulations of the Jewish people leaving Egypt. You can see them leaving, and of course to me this is magnificent. It's a pressed piece, but it's had a lot of handwork done as well. It's just gorgeous. But when you look at the story that it tells around the edge is just wonderful.
What is it for, John?
It's for the same. I showed this to my niece many years ago when she was fairly young. She said, "Well, where do you plug it in?" And I said, "Lots and low one round." I said, "Lisa, it was made in 17. They didn't have electricity. You try to."
I know this isn't silver, but I'm very curious about it because I love it. Could that be the
It's-
base of something
No,
that
it's-
might
it's a-
have been
No,
plated?
it's what we call white metal.
Right, like it's junky metal.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it has
I love it.
children's stories.
Right, it must be like late Victorian or.
Very much so. But this probably was gilded at one time,
Okay,
or it might have had a coating on it.
yeah.
But you know, it's the patterns. I have a little child's silver dish for, people look at it because they can put their Cheerios in it, but it shows nursery rhymes all around the edge so you can, as the kid's eating. But I just love to see this detail work on this.
Well, is there ever any sterling
No,
equivalent to that displacement piece?
Which is a newer thing. The rest is obsolete. I
yeah.
mean, it's from an obsolete mold.
Do you know what the pattern is?
I had all the paperwork. I had it in a folder, and my uncle who gave it to me said, "Don't lose this." I put it in a file cabinet in the basement, and we had a flood. I had people help me, and I think,
Oh,
All
Google,
the
I bet
verification.
Google, I bet Google could help you at least.
Oh, it's a beautiful pattern.
yeah, and
And it is a,
I thought he had told me it was in the 1700s.
It's a white ink.
It's obsolete.
this is the detective work now. The first thing I have to do is get made silver that I have in this particular book. And hers is whiting. This is whiting division. Okay, do you know what the pattern name is on this? I'll find it. Is it Old King? Does that sound familiar?
It could be, I just
How do-
really, I got it as a wedding gift 52 years ago.
Oh,
And
it's-
my
it's a-
uncle gave
it's
it to
a
me.
wonderful-
They had no children, it had been handed down in his family.
Wow.
And so, what he told me then,
No,
but
that's
it
not
was
it.
all written down.
King Edward.
Edward.
King Edward, and it was patented in 1901. And then I have to look here. It's inactive, so you can still get
That's-
pieces.
No, that's not it then. That's what, this, because I do remember that much. This one is that's probably what that is. But, and it's very similar.
Oh,
But this-
isn't it? Yeah.
But this is the obsolete one,
Okay.
so I don't know what
Because
that
when
is.
I'm looking,
Because there were no salad forks, and he got, or I didn't buy.
yeah.
He bought a
Because I
dozen
think-
salad forks and a dozen more
Now-
teaspoons, without the engraving of the initial.
Now see, that looks like the picture, doesn't it? But it is
I don't
different.
have money for that.
So
But you
Tom-
know,
Oh, sorry.
people, it could be the same because because of the different sizes, they sometimes had to condense the pattern.
I know it was not the same
Yeah.
pattern, but it was one that they
But-
found,
But
and
I
they
mean,
did one.
there's so many similarities.
It is very similar. Obviously, it doesn't have the engraving of the initial on it like the others.
Oh, this is a different company.
Actually,
Yes, this is Frank Smith. Frank Smith Company.
France, Smith,
Frank.
Frank.
Tom, unfortunately, I need to leave, but is there a way, where are you gonna be showing your silver again?
Pardon me?
You're gonna be having a show?
No, I'm done for the year.
Do you do
I-
private?
I used to do 8 shows a year and now I'm down to 2.
Wow.
This is a mystery. but it's gorgeous.
Isn't that pretty? I like
It's
it.
a lovely
Yeah.
set. Do you use it?
Oh, yes.
Good.
Yes.
You know what I used to do? I would take 4 place settings and put it in the kitchen jar, and every quarter, put it back and take.
There's a strange piece that I should have brought that to ask you what it was. It's a survey piece of some kind, I guess. It's got a handle like that, and then the end is kind of like a tube, a cylinder, and I don't know if you,
Oh, a cheese scoop.
the cheese scoop.
Oh.
Cheese scoop.
All right, so that's.
And that would do. They would use a Stilton cheese, and in England they would take a wedge of cheese, and they would put it on what they call a cheese boat, and it had a tin liner, and it was like with beautiful wood with little brass wheels in the bottom. You could roll it down the table, and you get and take a scoop.
That is.
I didn't bring a cheese scoop. No, I didn't bring one.
I didn't see one like it. All right, well.
But it's a lovely. It is a
For
gorgeous
that
set.
Frank Smith Company, was that what you think this piece is, or what
I think
these?
this is the other company.
That was the King Edward pattern?
No, this is the one that was.
Or the Frank
I'm
Smith?
look. I think it's the Frank Smith. But you
Okay.
know, this book doesn't have every single pattern in it. But that's why I was looking. I'm stuck.
Well,
But this is gorgeous.
I use those as serving spoons, I don't know if
Yes.
that's what they're supposed to be for. I
Yeah,
don't have to get
in
any of
America,
these.
America, that's is a serving spoon.
Oh, okay.
In England, it would be a formal soup. But we don't have, you know, to me, like my set, as I said, had 10 pieces per place sitting, but it's a magnificent set. Good for you.
So this is, I thought this was sterling also.
No, it's stainless
It
steel,
is stainless.
yeah. Because sterling as a knife cut is hard, it's, to make it strong enough.
Because when I polish that, the cloth gets black also. just
Oh,
like
yeah.
the sterling.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Just like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And but it's just, when you look at the detail on that.
Yeah.
I wish I had eyes that I could. It's gorgeous though. I wish
Thank you.
everyone would more appreciate silver and use it.
Have you heard of a manufacturer, Stoll?
Yes,
Is it a
Stowe was
Chippendale?
a store,
Oh, okay.
but they sold, a lot of times you'll find pieces of silver that, like a Tiffany would retail not only their own silver, but they even sold Durban
Oh,
silver.
okay,
So, but then it would say some Tiffany on it,
okay, yeah.
because that was identifying with the store
I think
itself.
my mom, well, her pattern was Chippendale.
Yes,
Is that a Stoll pattern?
Chippendale. I think it's, let me just check. Now, the Chippendale, there's a Dominic and half, there's a Gorham,
Okay.
Lunt, Toll,
Oh, a bunch of them.
Watson, Alvin,
Goodness. Okay.
Old Frank Smith. So there are a lot of companies that made it what they call a Chippendale, but there was some little variation and difference between the pattern. They weren't identical.
Okay. Yeah, it's a really pretty pattern, but not
Yeah.
very ornate.
Yeah. I personally like the plain.
Yeah.
The only reason I bought my set, it was kind of fancy because I got it at a good
So
deal.
silver plate is not really worth anything?
It's silver plate.
Like that teapot, that's not really worth anything, right?
It's worth something, but not big
Yeah, I'm not
dollars.
gonna retire on it, right?
Because no, as this is the heartbreaking thing about it to me, is that when you look at the workmanship on some of these pieces, and to think it's not sustaining value, I think this is I look at even furniture today. You look in the antique magazines that I get, you can't even buy the wood that these pieces are made from.
Right, yeah.
I mean, like brown, what they call brown furniture. I see beautiful curly maple desks that a few years ago were gone for $2,000-3,000. They're getting $400 and $500. Because sometimes the reason is you can't adapt. They're not big enough sometimes to put a computer on.
Yeah,
And see, that's where you can adapt things, or you can't travel. I think there's a couple in Francistown that had the most beautiful gardens. The house was full of wonderful stuff. And I remember that one daughter wanted the dining room chairs and the other daughter wanted a set of, now this is like a huge house, and she says, we've got all this stuff, and they don't want it. To me, that, I'm just waiting for that pendulum to come swinging the other way when we start to respect the things that our parents had and our grandparents. Though even though, I know when my grandparents bought the house I live in now, they had a small house first, then they bought the place I live in now. In 1917, they bought it, and it was at an auction. And I always love to tell the story. 150 acre house, 150 acres house, big barn and all that. My grandfather paid $2,800 for it. Now, when you think that day, now, you think of just whipping out a checkbook and writing $2,800. Well, I have the mortgage deed. A friend of hers, of my grandfather's, saw the place was going, what she thought was reasonable. She said to my grandfather, I'll give you a mortgage if you want it. 5% mortgage. And so he did. But it took him 30 years to pay it off.
Oh my
Because
goodness.
I remember when the mortgage was paid off in 47. You know, that's the thing. You at that time, you could have bought any property in Deering for under $5,000. Any big house with a lot of land under $5,000. So when I see houses, there was a house that was sold not too far from me. It sold for over $1 million. And I'm going, okay. I remember when, actually it was it's one of the finest country houses in New Hampshire on East Deering Road. What used to be called the Wolf Place. The family bought it, it was just over $1 million. But I remember when the Wolves came to Deering in the 50s and they paid $18,500. And we wanted all meet them to say, who can afford to spend $18,500 on a house? You know, it was just beyond. I mean, there was one year I paid 3 times in taxes what my grandfather paid for the place. And that's the reality of it, you know. And yes, you know.
So in 1806, at town meeting, they voted to build this
Yeah,
library,
the school.
schoolhouse.
Yeah.
And they put aside $78 so they
Yeah.
could build this.
Because they used to have, the library used to be in private houses
Yes.
before. It used to be in the Carew house in the Little L. It was in where Betsy Neville used to live on. And they were paid, I think, $8 to $10 a year to allow the library to be in their home. And then when this school was closed, they closed the school, I think in the 40s.
26.
Because you know, the 50,
1926.
yeah. Because my mother went to the North School, which used to be up on top of my hill, and the Riches bought it in 47, and they took it down piece by piece, and it's right on the Ware Deering line. And that was the old North School. Because there were at one time 13 schools in Deering, but they didn't all operate at the same time. If there were enough children in that area. Of course, as my grandmother used to say, with having 5 children, that they made up a few classes. And at that time, when we didn't have a high school, we could go to Hillsborough, but my mother and her siblings were fortunate in that they could go to Ware High School. And it was very interesting to me. I got to be careful how I say this, because Ware was so open to Deering people, which means opposite with Hillsborough. Enough said. You know, it was always interesting to me that my mother had so many friends in Ware that they loved Deering people. And it was always interesting when I think of your family, where Hazel Johnson, she had to go to Hillsborough, and her sisters went to Ware. And it was so night and day difference, because Ware opened up their heart to Deering people.
Yeah, I just didn't realize that relationship was so tight between East and North
Oh yeah, very
Deering
much so.
towards the Ware side.
Yeah.
Always seemed
Because they
very
were able to go to school.
Yeah.
Because I know that Marie and Florence Johnson went to Ware.
Yeah. Well, you also said there was the railroad down by where
Yeah.
that was also available, so. And
Oh.
after all, that is one of the oldest roads.
Yeah, the
In
first New
town. Yeah,
New Hampshire
right.
Turnpike. But there
Well-
was a railroad station in North Ware that they used all the time.
Yeah,
My great-grandfather used to send up horses, and my grandparents used to be able to take a bushel of potatoes, take it down to the Ware station, put it on the train, and it would go to Wellesley Hills to my great-grandparents. When you hear the conveniences back then, any more reminiscences?
We're just glad to have you to talk to, Tom.
Thank you, I appreciate it, and I love doing
Very
this.
interesting.